Time is ever fleeting. A moment gone is lost forever. But we can definitely capture, document, and preserve certain moments of life by clicking photographs. Later in life, by watching these photographs, the fond memories of the bygone years can be cherished, and we often relive those moments when the memories associated with the photographs come flooding to our minds. Hello students, I am Melvis Penny, and today we are going to take up a poem from our textbook Hornbill, a photograph by Shirley Tolson. Shirley Tolson wrote the poem A Photograph as a tribute to her mother. Before we move on to the explanation part, let us learn in brief about the poet. Shirley Tolson was born on 20th May 1924 in Henley-on-Thames, England. Since her early childhood, she had a huge passion for writing. She graduated in literature from Brockenhurst College, London. Most of her works, like Celtic Alternative, Celtic Years, Celtic Journeys, were greatly influenced by Celtic Christianity. One can find philosophical touches of Celtic Christianity in her other works too. The Drovers, East Anglia, Walking the Ley Lines and Ancient Tracks, Shadows in an Orchard are some of her famous works. She passed away at the ripe age of 94. The poem Photograph deals with the theme of loss, memory, and transience of life. It explores in a very strange way how people, even after death, continue to live on in the form of memories, which also can attain a tangible form, such as photographs. The entire poem revolves around a particular photograph of poet's mother, which was taken when she was 12 years old. The poem also deals with the various emotions that this particular photograph generates in the minds of the poet and her mother. The poem is written in blank verse, and the mood of the poem is nostalgic, as the poet travels down her memory lane, recalling the good old days that she spent with her mother, who is no more. The poem is written in 3 stanzas, depicting 3 stages of human life. The first stanza depicts the happy childhood of the poet's mother. The poet is looking at one of her mother's old photographs pasted on an album that is made of cardboard. This was taken when poet's mother had gone on a beach holiday along with her 2 younger cousins and an uncle. The photograph clearly depicts the happy state of her childhood. All 3 girls are seen paddling in the shallow water of sea. The photograph captured their joyous and holiday mood. Her mother was 12 years old and eldest of the 3. She stood in the center with each cousin holding her hands and posing, smiling through their hair at the uncle who took that snapshot. The poet describes her mother's face as a sweet one and reminds the readers about the time gap and asserts that the photograph was taken much before her birth, when her mother was free from responsibilities and pressures of motherhood, and her happy-go-lucky look and carefree attitude was clearly reflected on her sweet young face. Everything has changed since then, except the sea. The poet comments, over the years the sea has not changed, which reflects the perennial state of the aspects of nature. At the same time, the poet draws our attention to the temporary human footprints made on the sand being washed away by the sea waves, indicating the mortality of human beings. The last lines reveal the deeper principles of life, that the natural elements are eternal, whereas human life is temporary. Man takes birth, undergoes many changes at different stages of life, and finally dies. In the second stanza, the poet reminisces the happy moments that she had spent with her mother. After a lapse of time, she recalls fondly how on watching the photograph, her mother's face used to beam with happiness. She says she isn't sure whether it was 20 or 30 years after the photograph was taken, but she remembers her mother's laughter when she described her beach holiday with her cousins Betty and Dolly. She recalls how her mother would laugh embarrassingly at the awkward way they were made to dress up. The mother's sweet face or their dressing style all have changed with time, but that particular moment captured in the photograph still gave happiness to her mother even after 20-30 years later. The poet recollects with pain that the sea holiday was the symbol of her mother's happy childhood that she had left behind, and for the poet, the memory of her mother laughing is a relic of her own happy past. It reminds of her special bond that she shared with her mother and how she now misses it every moment. In both the cases, the memories of the past made both the women disappointed as they try hard to come to terms with what they had lost. The third stanza describes the pain and agony that the poet undergoes after her mother's death. She says, her mother has been dead for 12 years, that is the same number of the years that was the age of her in the photograph. The poet concludes the poem on a melancholy note that she has nothing to say about the situation where her mother is no more. The absence of her mother has left a void and emptiness that can never be filled. Death has silenced her mother, and the poet feels lonely and lost in the absence of her mother. Her pain and agony cannot be expressed or described in words. Mother's death silences all other thoughts and leaves her in utter pain. The poem beautifully expresses a few universal facts like we take photographs to capture a few special moments of our life so that we can hang on to those sweet memories and relive those moments. Each photograph reminds us life is short and hence each moment should be cherished and lived to the fullest. The poem also brings forth a bitter truth that a photograph, which is a source of happiness to us at one point of life, can also cause great agony at another point of time. Above all, the poem asserts that death is unavoidable. As soon as man is born, he is also condemned to death. Yet, when someone close to us dies, we feel that God has been unjust to us. This is exactly what the poet feels. She is unable to vocalize what effect her mother's death has had on her. She has been left speechless, lost, and devastated by her mother's death. Now, let's take up a few poetic devices employed in the poem A Photograph. Poetic devices are literary devices used in a poem to create rhythm, enhance a poem's meaning, or to intensify a mood or feeling. Cardboard in the first line is an example of poetic device allusion. Allusion is a reference to something that the reader is assumed to know. It can be a person, place, event, literary work, myth, art, etc. In this case, cardboard actually refers to the photograph, and cardboard's lack of durability hints at the lack of permanence of human life. The next poetic device used in this poem is alliteration. Alliteration is a poetic or literary device in which a series of words begin with the same consonant sound, like stood still, sa sound is repeated, my mother, ma sound is repeated, terribly transient, ta sound, consonant sound is repeated, silence, silences, the consonant sound sa is repeated here. Now let's move on to the next poetic device, synecdoche. Synecdoche is the poetic device in which the name of a part is used to refer to a whole. In transient feet, feet is part of body which actually stands for the entire human body. So it is an example of synecdoche. Transient feet is also the example of yet another poetic device named transferred epithet. In transferred epithet, an epithet, adjective or quality is transformed from one noun to another noun which is closely associated with it in the sentence. Transient feet, here feet refers to the human life. Noun life is actually transferred to feet. Finally, we move on to oxymoron. An oxymoron is a word or a phrase that contradicts itself. Labored ease is the perfect example of oxymoron. Labor actually means trying very hard or with great difficulty. On the contrary, ease means comfortably. So two contradictory words are used together. Thus, it's an example of oxymoron. With this, we wrap up the poem. Hope you all found this poem explanation interesting and useful. Your feedback will be highly appreciated. Your comments and suggestions would definitely help in our future endeavors. Thank you and stay healthy.